This is called Menage à Trois. I did not court ambition, for I am espoused to enlightenment. She slept in rags outside the cabin by the lake where we lived. I barely noticed her as I passed by, my thoughts fixed on the business of the one I love. Come the evening, I would sit before the fire and gaze into enlightenment's eyes. For us this was enough. But on those winter evenings when storms swept up the waves upon the lake, ambition would cry out pitifully and with cold and neglect. Eventually I hated her, poor beleaguered creature that she was, and granted her permission to lie at our feet between us on the hearth. All was well at first. Unperturbed, I would hold enlightenment's gaze above ambition while she slept on. But ambition grew emulous, and when we rose to take to bed, she became insistent and disrobed enticingly, stirring my desire as she demanded to join us. As she lay naked there before enlightenment's fire, I felt her lustfulness, acceded to her wish, and took ambition to our bed. As we three lay abed, I turned my back upon enlightenment to embrace ambition. And this was more than enlightenment could bear. She slipped out and fled away into the night. Come daylight, I reassured myself it did not matter. I thought ambition a better lover than enlightenment, who offered pleasures I had never known. Night after night, ambition would impassion me and fill my sleep with dreams of all the joy that she would bring. Eventually, there was nothing I would not do to keep her satisfied. But her heart was far from pure, and thinking to enchain me forever in my lust, ambition called her sisters fame and wealth, and promised me the pleasures of these lovers too. Thus, while I was beyond the freeing of myself, these three conspired to steal all of value that I possessed, distracting my attention with trivialities. And all the while they ransacked the adornments that enlightenment had brought into my home, until all that I had left of hers was one small candle. And this in my stupidity I could not bring myself to light. Day after day, at twilight, I would sit before the empty hearth where once an incandescent fire had burned. And all the while, these three necromancers incanted spells and cackled in unbounded glee while ice storms beat upon my house. Refusing to let me possess any of them, they sent a false comforter, whose name they said was Hope, and hope was fair. Sometimes she would smile at me enticingly, but if I should move to reach to her for comfort, anguish would pass across her face, and I drew back. Finally, she spoke in truth, and told me her name was Hopelessness. And thereupon this hapless maid did welcome my embrace. How many nights I lay there in the arms of hopelessness, I cannot say, but finally I could endure no more. I roared out frustration at the unbroken promises of ambition, fame, and wealth, and turned them from out my house. In shock, I looked upon the detritus these three had strewn about my home, while Hopelessness and I sat, embracing each other, before the empty grate where once enlightenment's fire had burned so brightly. For 7 starless nights we sat, the candle of enlightenment between us on the hearth unlit, for cause of my unbounded shame, until an angel came to sit with us, and shared our silent misery, until in curiosity I asked the angel's name. I am Courage, he replied. He said nothing more, but there was great compassion in his eyes. But at this I carred away, lest there should be a task that courage might demand of me, and thus I sat embracing hopelessness, knowing all the while that I should release her and cleave to courage in her stead. Eventually, in silence, courage took a taper, lit from his fiery sword, and held it out to me while looking deep into my eyes. And there we three did sit, until the grasp of hopelessness on me began to fade. And I reached out towards him. With shaking hands I took the light of courage and touched it to enlightenment's last candle. And as the flame then flickered into light, in its uncertain glow, my eyes swayed from hopelessness to courage, whilst on I shook in indecisive tears. Who knows how long I might have sat there in such agony? But from outside I heard a sound I recognized from long past dreams. I knew the truth, but could not hope believe it. Enlightenment's calm voice was calling out to me across the lake. I set my widening gaze to the angel, questioning. Then courage nodded at the candle until I took it up, walked out on hopelessness, and went to seek my love. As I stepped through the door, ambition, fame, and wealth still jostled about me, caressing me, distracting me, demanding readmission, while trying to snuff the candle in my hand. But I was having none of it. Roaring out in anger, I thrust them all away, and stopping up my ears against their calls, I showed each one my back, and stumbled on towards the storm-swept lake. Far out upon the water, way beyond my reach, I saw enlightenment, and she was calling to me. I couldn't look into her eyes, so great my grief for all that I had done. Instead, I fell upon my knees beside the waves and wept. Then courage stood beside me and whispered in my ear, "To reach enlightenment, you must walk upon the water." "Which of us can walk upon the water and not drown beneath the waves?" I asked, incredulous. "Anyone," he said, "so long as they esteem enlightenment above their life." "But this I have not done," I cried, still racked in shame. "And yet she beckons," said the angel. "But even now you have a choice. You could turn back to where ambition, fame, and wealth still wait. But always they will drag you back to hopelessness. If enlightenment is truly your first love, step out and she will tell you how to cross the raging lake to her." I looked at the little candle flickering in my hand. I looked at courage, steadfast in his gaze. Behind us I heard the necromancer's calls, and in my heart I knew, without enlightenment, I would prefer to sink beneath the waves and die. Enlightenment then spoke the secret courage promised in my ear. "The storm that drowns you is the one that rages not upon the lake, but in your heart." I set my foot upon the water, still not knowing if I could walk on it. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.